semester. We are proud to host Professor Jeremy Ghez here with his talk about leadership in the post-Obama, post-Brexit world. So the event will last about 1 hour, so please try to avoid leaving in the middle. And afterwards there will be some refreshments outside. So Professor Ghez is an affiliate professor of economics here in HSA. He teaches Grand Écoles, MBAs, and EMBAs here. He's academic director of the school's Center for Geopolitics, and his research focuses on global politics, strategic foresight, and economics. So without further ado, Professor Ghez.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jenna, and General Management Club, and their infinite wisdom, or not, I don't know, invited me to talk about this. For the personal story, I have to say, first and foremost, I'm thrilled to see all of you guys. On a personal note, I'm even more thrilled to see all of you guys in these circumstances. The last time I addressed the club, it was, a couple of weeks perhaps after the Paris attacks, and a mood that was far, far different. I never thought talking about a post-Obama and a post-Brexit world would be this easy, but it's kind of a personal revenge just to say, things are also sometimes about slightly more constructive things and not about such tragic events that even affected us as an institution. One of the challenges I also faced preparing all of this is how precise can you get? I don't think that Donald Trump is going to live tweet this conference. That would have been fun. But what I do know is that I can say many things over the next 20 or 30 minutes that is going to be contradicted by facts as soon as we get out of here, or for all I know, by some notifications that are all going to make your smartphones vibrate, So I wonder, in this world, can, anyone anticipate anything anymore? As Jenya correctly pointed out, I'm very much interested in strategic foresight. I'm very much interested in anticipation. But how much can you anticipate in the world we actually live in that is so unstable, that is so chaotic, and that basically reserves so many, many surprises down the line? So I thought to myself, well, if I had to write down the 3 core principles we can go to the bank on, if I can go and basically try to map out, those 3 propositions, I would say are the most valid in what I would call the post-world, the post-everything, meaning we're in uncharted waters. Don't even believe people who call themselves experts, in the sense that we're fundamentally in a really different landscape and one that keeps on shaking all the time. What would be the 3 principles that I would go to the bank on? Well, number 1, we maintain a relationship to uncertainty and chaos today that is far different than the one we had in the previous generation. In essence, they're not the hurdles that the previous generation used to think of. These are strategic assets now. And there might be, extremely interesting paradox, a smart way to generate uncertainty now. There might be a valuable way of creating uncertainty now. That's one heck of a game changer compared to the past. Number 2, firms. Polite way of talking about you guys. Will strive not only if you have good business strategy, that's not a very, very controversial point, but if you also have a really good political and societal strategy as well. Meaning strategy for the leader, the non-market component is becoming increasingly significant. And to me, to answer the question of leadership in a time horizon, in a forward-looking way, well, unless you bear that in mind, I have a hard time imagining how you can actually put 2 and 2 together in a good strategy. Number 3, perhaps that's the least controversial one of all, but it is controversial to the extent that that's the thing that's not changing. The more I think of it, the more I ask, who in the world is actually the one calling the shots, who is the one creating value, well, it has to be the interpreter. Try to define what the interpreter actually means. But ultimately, it's the guy or the gal looking to fix problems and looking for people who will be happy to see those fixes happen and therefore to put money on the table to help them. 3 principles that I'd like to discuss one by one very briefly and then draw some implications for the leader of tomorrow. Try to draw, that brief portrait. What does the leader of tomorrow look like, if you ask me, given what I'm interested in? So number 1, uncertainty and chaos. Not hurdles anymore, but strategic assets. I love this picture because Mr. President-elect just figured out he just got elected. And they strike a very different, tone from all of those pictures that we've seen of him, because there's kind of that humility that strikes anyone that has just, understood the nature of the challenge that he or she faces. And on foreign policy, he was actually very, very straightforward during the whole campaign, trying to explain what in the world he was trying to achieve. He said, look, I'm from the real estate industry, and what I know is that in the real estate industry is that whoever puts all of their cards on the table immediately, that's the equivalent of shooting yourself in the foot. Because if you put everything immediately, if you reveal your position immediately, how much you're willing to pay, how much you're willing to buy, so on and so forth, well, that's, violating every single principle strategy. He says, what I don't understand during that speech in 2016 is that more and more and more the United States is saying to the rest of the world exactly what we're about to do. Well, we're way too predictable because everyone knows, so that's basically amounting to shoot ourselves in the foot. That speech was actually found, seminal in the way we now think about uncertainty. At least to me, it says a whole lot. He was saying, we must, as a nation, be more unpredictable. We are totally predictable. We tell everything. We're sending troops. We tell them. We're sending something else. We have a news conference. We have to be unpredictable. And we have to be unpredictable starting now. Tell myself that's 4 lines of sentences, but saying the same thing, ultimately over and over and over, about the need for unpredictability and the need for basically stop shooting yourself in the foot by saying exactly what you're going to do all the time. If I had to generalize this from a leadership standpoint, what would a leader usually say? Be it the leader of a country, the leader of a company, be it the leader of any a big entity, he would say, look, my fellow citizens, my fellow colleagues, it's time we unite around a common vision, and at least we know that there's uncertainty, but we'll manage it together as a team. With this, we're saying we don't want to basically manage uncertainty. We want to generate uncertainty. That's where our strategic asset actually lies. Now that's really a really striking difference if you compare yesterday's generations of leader with today's generation of leader. And we maintain a really different relationship to uncertainty and chaos as a result. Proposition number 2. A good business strategy is not going to suffice in this context in which uncertainty and chaos don't scare that many people anymore. You're going to need a really good political and societal strategy as well. I've called in my old friends from game theory to explain this. And contrary to what some of you might think, no, this is not the game you know about. It's another one. So imagine I got $100 in my pocket. And I'm asking you, Jenya, you have to split it in 2. Okay? The part you're going to get and the part Sid is going to get. Right? So you decide, you can't look at him. You have to decide in your own mind how much are you going to let him take, how much you want. Here's the twist. If Sid accepts the split, you guys get the money the way you decided. If Sid says no, you get 0, he gets 0. So how would you divide the $100? Half, 50-50. Most people say that. And they've done this in lab experiments. So I've seen contradictory results. I used to think 80-20 used to be almost acceptable to Sid. Half-half is kind of the reference point. I'm guessing 80 is the most probably Genya could take for himself. Game theory has a slightly different view. Game theory says, well, Genya could say, I keep 99, and Sid gets 1. Sid should accept it, because if he says no, he's getting 0. If he accepts, he's getting 1. With 1, you can't even buy that Coke bottle anymore, but you could buy almost a Coke bottle. Sid, would you accept 99-1?
With that logic, maybe.
Ah, yes, because you're a clever man, yeah. Most people would say to Genya, go to hell. Drop dead. No way in the world I'm accepting that. Now, how do you explain that paradox? He's getting 1, and by saying to Genya, asking him to drop dead, he's getting 0 instead. Isn't that like committing suicide to some extent? Well, not so much, because Sid in this game believes he has nothing to lose. And actually, he has everything to win by conveying a message to Genya, this will not stand, and I'm not interested in this. All right, take that logic, translate that into, I don't know, the UK political climate right now, the US political climate. Let's stick to the UK. Don't know if there are any British people in the room, but are there? Yeah.
No.
Perhaps listening in, I don't know. But, we've told a lot of Europeans, don't tempt the devil. Remain in the mainstream. Remain, in favor of the European Union. Stick to the obvious choice, i.e. remain instead of Brexit. Stick to, the obvious candidate, Don't go radical. Do not turn to radical options. What is public opinion saying now? Through the Brexit, through Trump, through what we commonly call now the rise of populist movements. They're saying, look, I lost my job. My kids are probably going to live a life that is far worse than mine. I've listened to you and I've remained in the mainstream for so long. Can you please remind me what I've won by staying in the mainstream? Oh, those little incremental gains, that little 1 that Sid was getting? Well, guess what? I don't care. I don't want it anymore. I want to let you know how mad I am at you. And you know what? If I'm going to tempt the devil and vote for the not-so-obvious candidate, I'm just going to see your face for a moment, and we might have a good laugh. And it can't possibly be worse than what I've gotten, the deal that I've gotten for the past 10 years. More and more and more, politicians first line, but second line, senior executives, are facing public opinions that believe they have nothing to lose anymore. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a far different game than any of your predecessors have been playing. To me, this means a consumer base that is far more volatile, that is far more empowered, not necessarily to influence outcomes, but certainly forbid you from reaching the outcomes you favor or that you consider the best. Be careful about that, because strategy in chaotic times, especially with people that don't necessarily believe they have anything to lose, well, that gets extremely hard to conduct and extremely hard to do. Number 3, the entrepreneur, looking to fix what is broken. That's what we can go to the bank on. First 2 points are about how things are changing. That's about how things are remaining quite the same. I love Bloomberg's cover. Very, very provocative. Oh, you're so boring, Elon. You're so boring. Which is kind of ironic. This is the guy who made a stream, talked about, going to Mars or the Hyperloop and so on and so forth. But what have we learned about Elon Musk's daily routine? He gets in a car, goes from home to work, gets in traffic jam, and Elon is not happy. Interestingly enough, that's exactly my routine, so it makes me feel good, Elon Musk, Jeremy, same issues. Except that Elon Musk is actually far, far more gifted than me, especially on the technological route. He starts to think, we have a clear policy problem here, traffic. And he starts to calculate in his own mind, how much money am I losing in traffic? And he comes up with this idea, let's build tunnels, you know? So what's so interesting to me is that leadership, ultimately, yes, you can whine about how chaotic the world is. Yes, you can whine about how political and politicized, more to the point, the world is. But you know what? There's only one unique recipe for success. It's still very being down to earth, very analytical, and very, very much aware of those problems that are around you and that people would be willing to basically fix, that you would be able to fix, and that people would be willing to pay you to fix it. Ultimately, that's the figure, to me, of the entrepreneur, the fixer. And that is still fundamentally true. Some of you still owe me an assignment, so I won't say too much about Schumpeter. But he imagined that back in the 1940s, 70, 80 years later, that's still a fundamental truth. All right, so what? So what? Sign up for my MOOC. There you go. That's so what. Available online for free. A little bit of self-promotion. Sorry, let's move on. The leader of tomorrow necessarily has to be analytical. Necessarily needs to be analytical in the sense that, in the age of fake news, in the age of alternative facts, in the age of a political landscape that's going to basically explode in your face every single moment, you wonder where's the next crisis going to come from? You do not have the luxury to ignore facts. You do not have the luxury to ignore the truth. This is non-negotiable. And the temptation to do the opposite is quite significant, but that, ladies and gentlemen, is not negotiable for any leader, would-be leader, in the sense that you're going to need to start from something, and from something concrete. In business terms, pay attention. So we've talked about this with some of you in the room. If we haven't talked about this, we will talk about this surely soon enough. How oil majors are basically revisiting what their business model is all about. And some of them, including Del Spencer at BP, basically saying, look, contrary to a consensus on the market expecting a bounce back of oil prices, we might actually live a very long, protracted period of low prices. That's going to require things from us. If BP is able to come to that conclusion, it is because it has a chief economist. A chief economist who's paid to basically imagine the next model, meaning paid to imagine, I would say, the long-term trends beyond the noise. A lot of you, with an MBA in your pocket, or almost in your pocket, I would venture a guess you're probably going to be slightly more generalist than the chief economist at BP. But you must be literate enough in all of this literature not to be fooled by experts. And to say you guys are going to be consumers of this, well, to avoid alternative facts, to avoid fake news. That's going to be the first takeaway. Similarly, you guys all know about Jigsaw at Google. Wonderful work at Google. So this is the Google guys, looking at the Arab Springs and looking at each other and saying, oh, hold on, did we just cause this? The usual humility at Google, did we just cause the Arab Springs? And they basically said to themselves, it has to be the case that Google has an effect on these types of revolutions, and vice versa. These types of revolutions influence the way we should do business at Google. Let's build a think tank. Jared Cohen, former strongman of Hillary Clinton at the State Department, very young former diplomat, is in charge of all of this at Google. These two little examples really going to a far greater trend in business of trying to build your own think tanks. And again, avoid the fake news. Do not be taken hostage by the news cycle, which is probably going to pollute you more than anything else. Be analytical in a very, very ideological world. Please don't lack imagination, would be the lesson number 2. If the recent months have taught me anything, it's that improbable doesn't mean impossible. My own expense, I've learned that, as some of you might guess. And being imaginative, and not lacking imagination, is the part of what every single leader in this room, the task of every single leader in this room. So we understand what this means, create your own product, create your own service, differentiate, favor, and all of that. But it also means, look, recognizing, admitting that, accepting, perhaps even more importantly, that our human brain is probably not very well wired to think long run. Probably not very well wired to think outside the box, as we usually say. Not very well wired either to basically try to create something completely new in uncharted waters. We're not really good at that. Who's really good at that instead of us? Adults in the room. I've never been as good of a social scientist than, when I became a father. Because when there's a big bada boom in the room of my children, Daddy does what? He rushes to the room saying, oh please, not the emergency room, not tonight, please. And instead, I end up in a room with 2 little kids, 19 months and 4.5, laughing their hearts out. And I often question, why are they laughing when Daddy's so scared? And I've come up with a couple of answers. First and foremost, that look on Daddy's face. Oh my God, that is so funny. Let's put that aside. The second thing is, the kid is experimenting. And the big bada boom scares me, but it reassures them. Why? Because they've figured out something new. They've learned something new. We're talking about young kids who don't know anything about life. So when you don't know about life, what do? You observe. You ask questions. When you're a 19th-month little old girl, as smart as she is, and as strategic as she is, she will handle the principles of strategy better than anyone I know. But she can't formulate any questions. So what do my kids do, like any other kids? They experiment. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has been proven by research. A kid understands the idea of a probability distribution, believe it or not. Except that she also understands the fact that they don't know what it is. So since they don't know what it is, I poke at the problem and I try to see basically what's going to happen. I say all of this because you guys might have heard about the Freakonomics guys who came up with that whole chapter, Think Like a Kid or Act Like a Kid. Well, it's exactly the same invitation. Don't lack imagination is about what? It's about saying, this we used to be able to do. We used to know how to do it when we were kids. Somehow, as we grow up, we're basically more and more constrained in a box, and we forbid ourselves from experimenting. So when we should not lack imagination, we should not act in a childish way. But we should remember, that if impossible and probable don't mean the same thing, well, the more I confuse the two concepts, the more my vision of future reality is going to be constrained. And the less I broaden my horizons, the more I'm going to be blindsided by strategic surprises. Please do not lack curiosity. Do not lack imagination. Point number 3, be pragmatic, which you might think is kind of contradictory with don't lack imagination. But it's fundamental, because I would like the leader, and I think the perfect leader is who? The dreamer, who has a perfect understanding of market forces. Kind of the realistic dreamer. That might sound like an oxymoron to you, but that sounds like the best definition of the leader to me. The one who basically understands that the sky's the limit, you can do anything you want, up until the moment you understand what market forces are actually telling you, what you can do and what you can't do. And I know of no one, Superman included, who can go against market forces. That's basically the third part. Be pragmatic. Be Elon Musk. Be as boring as Elon Musk. Be as poetic as a really good poet, but be as boring as Elon Musk. All right, so that brings us where? The next leader. Looking ahead. It's going to be an analytical, or well, actually, first and foremost, a curious one. An analytical one and a pragmatic one at the same time. You might think to yourself, oh my God, how am I ever going to be able to master those three human qualities at the same time? Well, perhaps the leader of tomorrow is more a group of people inside a firm. Perhaps the inventive CEO is going to know he lacks analytics, he lacks pragmatism, so he's going to build the perfect team. That's another way to look at it. But ultimately, if I had to tie this back into what we really worry about, what we really focus about these days, saying this is a more chaotic world, this is a more unstable world, this is a more unpredictable world, then it's going to have to mean at some point in time that you're going to have to combine these three. Otherwise, the warning is coming straight from the Silicon Valley. Couple of days after the November elections in the United States, coming from what the French call a serial entrepreneur. His name's Carlos Diaz. And he said, the America that voted for Trump does not own a Tesla, nor an iPhone, and when it needs money, it does not ask business angels for help. It relies on really bad credits. It's time to recognize that we need to develop technologies and businesses that will benefit the widest range of people possible, algorithms that do not divide, but that bring together. And what I find absolutely fascinating is that there was a word of warning in this, saying if you do lack those three qualities, well, we together as a society, we're going straight hitting the wall, and that's a collision I don't want to see, because it's a pretty scary one to me. In the sense that, this is lacking imagination, but it's also lacking pragmatism. This revolution that has put really fancy tools all over in our pockets is kind of leaving aside a significant part of the population. And that division is probably not sustainable. But I also see in this testimony a form of, I would say, hope as well. In the sense that, this is a pretty capitalist system. It's one that, puts a lot of emphasis on free markets. But on the other hand, it's also recognizing that there is no inherent contradiction between capitalism and free markets on the one hand, and sustainability and inclusiveness on the other. In other words, the true leader, able to combine those three features for himself or herself or inside the team, will likely be able, to get geared up for that next revolution that's about to happen, one that is going to be far more inclusive, far more environmental friendly, for instance, far more inclined in favor of unity rather than just plain division. Why? Because the next leader is altruistic? I wouldn't try to sell that to you. I'd be laughed out of the room, and rightfully so. No, because the next CEO is pragmatic enough and realistic enough to understand that any model that would come in and that doesn't respect those principles is unlikely to be sustained anyway. And it's that recognition, I think, that the leader really would be able to make once those three features are actually brought together. I don't even know how much I've talked. See, when I start talking, anyway. But that's about what I had to say, Jenya. So we open it up for conversation. They've behaved very well, Yeah.
So basically from now on it's an interactive talk. So if anybody wants to react and to say his thoughts.
So within the last week, Jeffrey Immelt from GE made a statement that the global elite is dead. I don't know what you...
That the global?
Elite is dead.
Oh, yeah.
And what your take is on that?
Yeah, it is dead, yeah. In the sense that there's no more pilot in the Western plane, I guess. That's the point, yeah? I think that's absolutely correct. Ian Bremmer, a political scientist in Washington, calls this period of Pax Americana, period where, the U.S. was basically at the head of international governance, trying to build the governance system that we usually call the Bretton Woods institution. Think IMF, World Bank, United Nations, and so on. United Nations, not really a Bretton Woods institution, but it was kind of the whole model. And the moment Donald Trump gets elected, why does Pax Americana end? Well, because from 1945 to a period very close to now, the United States, for better or for worse, with success or without success, was trying to generate some form of certainty for the rest of the world, trying to generate some form of stability for the rest of the world. Now, we're completely in uncharted waters in the sense that the logic is completely reversed. That tells me what? It tells me that, well, two things. One, well, kind of controversial. The second, really controversial. I'll start with the least controversial one. Anyone wanting to occupy the pilot's seat anytime soon in the Western Plain would have a boulevard in front of him or her. You know? Any candidates? Angela Merkel? I'm thinking for historical, cultural reasons, we might need a couple of other generations in Germany for that to happen. The UK, basically, they've signaled to the rest of the world, no way, I mean, enough. The US is out of the question. Russia? Perhaps. I'm not entirely sure that, you know, Western nations or citizens of people in the US or the European Union would be comfortable with that. Kind of want to go out on a limb here and say China, we wouldn't be comfortable with that either. So let me be the French guy in the room and say, man, if the political situation in this country wasn't as poor as it is, there'd be a boulevard. Just think about this, okay? And next time this happens, remember, I was the one who told you. When there's public discontent, where do we usually go? The extremes. This country has a big share of people who are not so happy. You guys go to Paris, you take a car in Paris, and you see how many people aren't so happy. They might go to the extremes, which is not something I'm very happy about, but that's just my personal opinion. Where else are they going to say we're not happy? Anyone caught that? To say we're not happy? Who are they voting for? Or who would they say will they be voting for? The guy who's under 40, who's a former banker, and who basically said, I'm going to, you know, reform everything. Interestingly enough, for the first time I can think of, discontent is going to the center. That might actually be a very first attempt to reinvent what the West is about. I'm done being a friend. I hope I've addressed your point.
Yes.
Yeah? My friend.
I was going to ask you, I really like your message. You said we, at this time of alternative facts, we must stick to the truth. So for young people that are seeing someone like Donald Trump, that is as far from the truth as you can imagine, how do they then stick to the truth? Or because here you have in power someone who basically built it on falsehoods, whatever you want. Question. Systematically. You know? I'm often called an expert, so I know something about it. Don't trust experts. Don't. Just don't. Listen to them, but there's a difference between listening to them and not trusting them. Ultimately, bear in mind that the only person who's going to have to take responsibility for what you decide is you and no one else. So don't get blindsided by that either. And ultimately as well, second point, you know, take your political views, go online, and try to figure out whoever is at the most extreme end of your political views. Okay, so I don't know and I don't want to know. I'm not asking what your political views are. But say if you're a US citizen and you believe, you know, Mother Jones and MSNBC, meaning the far left. Well, far left, no. Depends on how you look at it. But medium more on the left, let's put it that way, are the God-given truth. Well, start listening to Fox News and to Laura Ingraham and so on and so forth far more. You know, if you think Fox News is the truth, well, then go listen to MSNBC more and more and more. And if you're at the center, well, you get a really good deal. You have to listen to both, actually, more and more and more. Challenge yourself systematically and challenge what you know systematically. The problem with this is be careful, because don't end up ultimately saying there is no truth, because, you know, that's how the worst dictatorships we know started out. But do be worried about a consensual view. Come up with something that basically contradicts it and have the evidence ready. Have basically the demonstration ready to whoever wants to listen. How do I know you are right? Have it ready. That's how I would go about all of this. But question is probably. And by the way, you guys we are all a very, very happy generation because thanks to the internet and so on, we've never had this much potential to question. We can now do it actually quite nicely. So, yes, Christine.
So, you at the beginning you used the example of real estate and the Donald Trump's statement that we don't want the world to know what's in our cards, and we want to be unpredictable. But the reason why we are at the prosperous state that we are now, and not just in the West, like the whole world in the last 30 years has undergone an incredible transformation. We've gotten so many people out of poverty worldwide. Infant mortality rate is at the lowest it's been in a while. Wars are actually at the lowest. We are actually at a really good point technically, and it's come about because we looked at it. We all put our cards on the table and we collaborated. So the question is now, if we create uncertainty and if we do, if we look at the movements that are more isolationist, will we have to give all that back up? Will we come into danger that we're going backwards and we're suffering from worse conditions than we do now?
No, I think you're exactly it. I think that's exactly it, and you're exactly right. That's kind of the big problem that we're facing with this type of relationship to uncertainty. But here's my problem. Unless your name is Donald Trump, and I don't think it is, you have no choice than to accept that new deal and that new relationship to uncertainty. You have to accept that idea that you keep on being disrupted. So how do you deal with disruption? Well, you disrupt yourself, so to speak. The first point you made, I think, is absolutely essential, which is we have never been healthier. We have never been wealthier. We've never been, going back to the previous point, more connected. I've never known as much as Germany as any of my predecessors, thanks to what? Well, because the internet tells me so much about you, plus this MBA program, I get to meet you, and then I get to check whether what I read is right or wrong, So I've never been disinformed and so on. So uncertainty is kind of bringing us in uncharted waters, a kind of a cool recollection of telling us, look, you have to be careful because what you think you know is always going to change. But my hunch is you can't do anything about it. On the risks, and if your question is, do I wish that Donald Trump would have chosen something else? Certainly, but I'm kind of thinking that's a given now. And it's certainly what's going to be what we're going to have to suffer from now. Yes, ma'am.
So this sort of dovetails what you were asking, but there's a conversation among Democrats in the U.S. now, which I think can sort of be translated into the business environment, which is that all the Democrats essentially felt like they showed up to a gunfight with a knife because Trump essentially changed the rules, and he lied and no one cared, and he kept lying and people still didn't care. And so in politics, people are really afraid that this is setting a precedent where future candidates can now show up and lie. And so I guess my question is, do you think that in business or sort of in the enterprise world, are we going to see the same thing where the rules are just going to change and companies can lie to shareholders and withhold information and all of that, and there won't be as many repercussions for leaders who have vested interest in that happening?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What I do know is that for now, there are still laws in place against what you describe, namely withholding information in terms of lying to shareholders. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm almost sure that's completely illegal. I'm thinking out loud, so please be indulgent with me. Let's see where this leads us. But I'm thinking that, the fundamental difference between politics and business, I would say that in the short run, in politics, you can lie all you want. The French have a beautiful saying, the promises are commitments just to people who believe them, meaning, those who make them, they're not committing to anything. It's just who believe them, right? So in essence, nothing's really changing with the lying politician. And the most cynical people in this room would say, what else is new? So you could agree. I agree with you to the degree, the extent to which, but there you go. In business, on the contrary, what happens in the short run is that basically a business leader who lies gets sanctioned not during elections, but on stock markets immediately. You've seen that with examples of a German car maker recently. You see that with examples of just the business that's just putting out a really bad product out there. Don't even have to lie. You just get punished because financial markets keep on telling you you're bluffing. There's no possible way this can be a next model that's going to guarantee sustainability. And when you go back to how you price an asset, what is the price of an asset? It's basically all future cash flows coming in. That means that ultimately your stock price coming down, that's saying a whole lot about long-term perspectives of how the stock market imagines. So I think that's the major difference. I don't think that lies are that sustainable in business. But, and there is a big but, how do these two interact? Because my big interest is not in one or the other. It's really at the crossword of both, and namely the political environment is a significant chunk of the business environment now. And I don't think all of you guys can go on thinking to yourself, oh, well, it's okay, we got liars and our politicians are liars, everything's going to be okay. You can't say that anymore because this is bound to have some form of effect on you. I'm reminded of Kipling, to go back to a great writer, great poet, when everything's basically going haywire around you, I wish I could quote that word for word. But, you'll be a man, how do I know? It's when you get to basically keep your head on your shoulders and not follow the trend. That's the true challenge for business leaders today. To remain basically not tempted by that easy way out of the lie, you will be sanctioned no matter what. But to be even more analytical, to be even more demanding with regards to truth, be even more demanding with regards to your teams.
Do you think it's optimistic, though?
Do I think that's an optimistic view? I think it's optimistic because, well, I am thinking to myself, I didn't give you the even more controversial standpoint. I stopped at the first one. The second possibility in all of this is that what we're seeing right now is that, the monopoly doesn't have the same financial firepower. It doesn't have the same mandate. It doesn't have the same legitimacy to do many of the things it used to do. The state as we know it might have lost its monopoly. So you know what? We talked about shared value together. It's kind of the same argument when you think about it. When the state is unable to conduct its fundamental missions, if the state has lost its monopoly, wink, wink, sorry, private sector, the bill might actually fall in your lap at some point in time. And it might actually be your job to start basically bringing all of this, not because I'm asking you to be good citizens, God forbid, but because I'm asking you guys to be pragmatic enough to recognize that the first sector threatened by this is the economy. And it's up to you guys to fix it. Does that address your point? Well, kind of at least opens up the debate, right?
Yeah.
I saw a bunch of other hands up, but yes, sir.
How do you feel about corporate political activism? Would you suggest that...
How do I feel about what? I'm sorry?
Corporate political activism. Like, if you have a political stand, would you suggest that you just shut up and sort of smartly kind of think of all the strategies that you just mentioned? Or do you actually take a stand, for instance, when there's something that sounds fascist or bigoted and organizations say, okay, we're not, but they can still face boycotts by people?
It's a very hard question, the political stance of corporations, I mean, Elon Musk tried, and then all of a sudden he became evil for one day on social media, because he was too close to Donald Trump. Uber tried, and it backlashed miserably against them. I do have some sympathy for Uber, because if they had not suspended search prices, and if they had maintained search prices, so during the immigration ban, when there was a strike on the part of the New York cabs, and where basically they suspended surge, everyone said you're basically trying to kill the taxi cab, taxi cab industry. If they had done the opposite and let the surge happen, everyone would have told them you're basically trying to ride a political crisis. A little bit what they said, I think it was in Australia during a terror attack, the search price of Uber went through the roof, and people accused them of trying to ride off a political or a terror attack, It's very, very hard. And you're really going to annoy a whole lot of people without a doubt. I would say stick to the basics, On the immigration front, I find it very interesting how a group of companies, including the tech giants, basically explain this is hurting our business because we need the engineers. And you know what? Those foreign engineers aren't stealing the jobs of any Americans. The fact of the matter is we don't have enough engineers in this country. And by the way, in terms of demographics, excuse me, I'm losing my English, this is terrible. A country that is getting older and older, we're going to need that workforce anyway. Think from the basics point of view still, when you're a business, about the Apple FBI showdown, which happened before Trump, but it was kind of a harbinger for all of this. In the sense of, I give up and I crack that phone for the FBI, I'm basically putting myself in a situation. So key information on that iPhone to basically uncover what was in the mind of the San Bernardino attacker. This was December 2015, if my memory serves me right. Either I give up, but that basically is going to feed in all of that conversation about, the NSA, Edward Snowden, where are the big tech giants on the side of the government more? Or I try to transform that into a marketing strategy about, and this is exactly what Tim Cook said and did, basically say, the consumer, I understand your need for security, but please back me up on this because basically my ability to protect your data is going to be key going down line and basically how Apple treats privacy and how we treat privacy as a society when you think government, civil society, and the corporate sector. I would say you always go back to basics and try to basically formulate this in a way that a consumer can understand, because the consumer is far from stupid. He understands and she understands the basics of the business. To start with a long manifesto of 6,000 words when you are at the head of the world's most famous social media, and to start thinking about what community means and so on, be careful, because to me you're starting to look like a guru rather than like a business leader. That's where I started to get nervous. Now, truth be told, when you read what Mark Zuckerberg wrote about the community, it's a really interesting political vision of what the world is going to look like going down the line. And I can't help to think about my deceased grandparents, to think, what would that community have brought them? Very concretely. Interesting question. But so long term, I wonder if the potential for backlash right there isn't greater. And I hope I've addressed your point, which is a really good question. Have we run out of time, or questions, or both?
I have a last question, maybe.
But connecting on that, isn't the message that is coming that globalization as an overall isn't bringing enough to the people, regarding how we split €100 and policy perceptions, globalization doesn't bring anything. And so everything is coming out from Brexit or Trump is we don't want globalization. But I haven't seen impact so far on the business. What, in your opinion, what would be the impact on business and how they should assess these boys?
I wish I had put up the graph that I have seen many times circulate from the Harvard Business Review that basically shows that the US and European middle class is still wealthier and richer than the Asian middle class, for instance. But it's a very, very fantastic, we can share it by email, very fantastic graph because it shows how little progress there has been in terms of, I'm guessing, real purchasing power compared to the Asian middle class that has been quite significant. So in essence, yes, our middle classes in our countries have benefited to some extent in Western countries, but the momentum is so small, whereas the potential on the Asian part is so big that basically
a lot of workers are kind of feeling I'm basically being left out of this whole process. How do we solve this from a business standpoint? It's a common joke, conversation between the CFO and the CEO. The CFO tells the CEO, we can't be training all of these people. Imagine they leave. What happens? And the CEO responds, what if they stay and we haven't trained them? You guys are going to find it ironic or not so ironic that the professor is going to say what to the business? Train, train, train. Question, 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 but on the other hand, train, train, train. That is the fundamental firewall against the worst effects of globalization. We often say France, the European Union in general, has a massive unemployment problem. We don't. That's not true. When you look at the numbers, who is really unemployed? It's the people who didn't have the privilege to have that training, who are basically low-skilled workers, who are still human resources. And what we've been trying to promise them for years on the political end is, by God, we will save your jobs. I will save your jobs. That was the populism 1.0. But guess what? We can't save jobs. That's done. We can protect people, on the other hand, and we can protect them by training. So if I go back to this notion that the state might have lost its monopoly, well, I go back to this notion of saying, train, train, train. A career long in any business these days, in one unique business, that doesn't exist anymore. A guy who did his career in one business, that doesn't exist. Because you guys don't have the same definition of loyalty towards your employer as your parents' generation had, and your employer doesn't have the same definition of loyalty either. This is a two-way street. That might need to change. That might need to change because in terms of globalization, the more you respect the individual and the more you train the individual, that's the more you can start to unleash a wide range of opportunities. I hope I'm addressing your point and I've understood your point.
Okay.
Jenya? Cool. Thank you. I didn't expect that.
So on behalf of the club, I want
Thank you very much.
Have this for your fascinating talk.
Thank you.
You studied strategic foresight.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can foresee what this is.
Champagne? No?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation.